I want to welcome you for joining today. We are recording this call, and it'll be available for review on the Perspectium webpage in a couple of days after we're finished. We've got to tidy it up, make it look nice. I'm Andrew Pritchard. I'm Director of Marketing for Perspectium, and I'm joined really by the star of today's show is Donovan Stone, who's one of our solutions architects. And I just explained that we haven't had our corporate headshots taken yet, so I used some older pictures of us. That's me on the left. I've lost a little bit of hair since then. Donovan's beard's filled in nicely though, so I think we're ready to go. So what we're here to talk about today is what are the challenges that the service provider faces and how can Perspectium help you in that space? The reality is that it's a nightmare world for service providers in a lot of ways. You have a combination of customers and a combination of services. Some customers will sign up for some services, some will sign up for only one. And managing that, plus managing the complexity of all the different services you offer and the service providers who are involved in the delivery of service, that is a very complex world, especially if you're involved in a customer's SIAM environment and you're actually responsible for or involved in the integration with other service providers. How can you make sure that you are providing the complete service and understand what's going on with the complete service? You've got to figure out, how do I get customers on board quickly? Because the faster you can onboard a customer, the faster you can be delivering a service for them, and the faster you can be providing value for your own business. The second one is, how do I make sure that I have a visibility across the entire service? How do I make sure that we've got accountability for ourselves to the customer? If other partners are involved, how do we make sure that we're clear on what they're working on? And how do we manage the performance of that end-to-end service? And when it's time, how do we update the customer? And this is one of the things that Donovan will be touching on today is, how do we make sure that when the service is updated or components of the service is updated, that's done in the fastest possible time? And I should say, we do have everyone in mute mode just to avoid any background noise. But if you have questions, please feel free to ask them using the chat facility through the little control panel on the right-hand side. We'll try and get through as many questions as come in today, and any we miss, we will get back to you offline. So we look now, hopefully, everyone looks now not just at individual functions, but at how the IT process works. I mean, this is a subset of the kind of services that you could either be involved in from the customer's perspective or delivering as a service to the customer. And the reality today is that IT processes flow across these silos. You can have multiple functions within yourself as a service provider involved in delivering different components. You can have third parties involved. You can have the customer themselves involved, where some of the service is their own organization and some is yours. And how you get the data and how you use workflow and automate the entire process across those silos is particularly challenging. The way that a lot of organizations still do it today is what we call the swivel chair integration, where you have one person sitting monitoring data coming in through one application, and when they see something that needs to be done or transferred to another system, that they cut and paste, they swivel their chair, and they move to the other application. It is so risk-ridden by data being missed, by data being incorrectly entered in one system or the other, and what ends up is that the customer is given a partial view. You as a service provider may actually introduce the risk of SLA breach if something that one person was supposed to transfer from system A to system B gets missed. It is definitively the worst form of integration today, probably still one of the most common. Next approach, which has been around forever, is you do it yourself. And it sometimes sounds quite appealing, thinking, well, we've got all these developers on staff, why don't we just develop the integration ourselves? It's significantly costlier and more timely than you might think. If you've not done it, you're probably thinking, no, that can't be right. If you have done it, you're probably thinking, yeah, that took us way longer than we expected. And then when the guy who did the integration left the company, no one else knew what to do. We couldn't figure out how it worked, and we had to start from scratch. What's been around for about 10 years now are a number of options from different companies offering integration toolkits. These look appealing, and in fact they are appealing compared to the do-it-yourself, and certainly compared to swivel chair. But the reality is, when you still have to develop the integration into the end application, it's still a form of do-it-yourself. You're using bigger tools, but you're still the builder. And that's where Perspectium comes in. Our approach since we were founded was to deliver integration as a service, where we have the responsibility for building and maintaining the integration on a subscription model, so that we are responsible for delivering data from the consumer, or from the data production application to the data consumption application. We are responsible for maintaining the application integrity when one or both of the applications get upgraded. Vendors have a habit of updating their software. We will maintain the integration upgrades. And it's our responsibility and our accountability to make sure that that integration just works. It's the whole concept of, why go with cloud? Why go with X as a service is someone else is making sure that things are working nicely. So we've been around for about 4 years now. We were founded by some significant innovators in this cloud service management space. For those who are familiar, David Liu, who's our CEO, was the founding developer and employee number 2 at ServiceNow. And the team has got significant experience in understanding how to make ServiceNow work, but also and increasingly how to integrate ServiceNow with other key components of the business environment. There should be no limitation on how an application sits within a business just because it can't be integrated from point A to point B. We have developed the capability of delivering vast quantities of records in a really short space of time with almost no impact on the performance of the applications where the data is coming from or going to. And that last one is a key implementation factor. I'm going to let Donovan talk more about how we do that. But we've got customers who are transferring millions, tens of millions of records per day between the systems, and doing it in production hours, doing it in real-time mode, rather than having to take systems offline or do their batch reporting at 2 in the morning because no one's using the system. What we look at, and for us, what integration as a service really means is we need to give you the control. That the application owner has to retain control from within the native application. ServiceNow is the principal focus for this session, but it's the same is true with Salesforce. Is control needs to remain with the application owner rather than just publishing data out into the ether and allowing any other application to be able to grab it. Security factors are a major issue in the cloud, and we spend an awful lot of time maintaining control for our users. Availability means when you need integration to happen, it has to happen, and it has to happen there and then. And I've said we've got customers who've got the ability to push huge quantities of data whenever they need to through our service. And our goal is we want to be able to allow you to connect anything with anything. In a service provider world, that's critical because when you sign on a new customer, you may be integrating with their on-premise system. They may need that to continue for quite some time. They may bring other components to the table that they need you to integrate with, either in their own organization or within the SIAM environment, having you integrate directly with other service providers in the process. So this is for us what integration as a service really means. For the managed service providers, we provide 4 basic building blocks. How do you take your applications and integrate the customer? How do you get the customer on board when they first join? How do you ensure complete consistency and integrity of CMDB? How do you make sure that if you are synchronizing with the customer's service management system, that you can do that in real time, so that when a service record is entered on the customer site, it's immediately on your site, and that as you are updating the incident, that information is immediately flowing back to the customer so that everyone involved has immediate visibility into what's the current status. The other option is there's a lot of customers who take data out of applications and put them in databases. Creation of data lakes and big data environments is one of the more common ones today. The other one is to be able to use any of the, there's some fantastic analytical reporting tools. We've got customers who are doing great things on taking information out of their ServiceNow environment and using Tableau as a visualization method on how to see on a graph or see on a map where are the incidents happening. And as a service provider, again, if you're suddenly seeing increases coming from multiple customers in the Bay Area, the San Francisco Bay Area, you may need to look at something that's not individual customer focused, but something that's more infrastructure based. Once the customer's up and running, you have to manage that environment on an ongoing basis. How do you update the service catalogs? And if you've got Some customers have got unique service catalogs. How do you push that out as soon as it's available? If you've got customers using a common service catalog, how do you push that out to all of your customers simultaneously or simultaneously, given that I'm now a US citizen? How do you make sure that you're doing the management components of your business as a service provider without adding the need for headcount and the need for costly resource people to be able to deal with the scaling business? As you add more customers, you cannot add more money to support the increasing customers. The system needs to help. And finally is, how do you make sure that the business is running effectively? The ability to take value and data from the applications and produce dashboards to understand how are we doing, either at the individual customer level, how are we doing for that customer, or across the service, how are we doing with the incident management service? How are we doing in the aggregate? Are we meeting our SLAs? Are we finding areas where we're getting closer to SLA breach than we really want to? And having dashboards to help you manage your business as a service provider to better service the customers that are under your care and attention. Those are the 4 key factors that we see within our MSP portfolio. Some of the customers who have already enjoying the values that we bring, on the left I've got some of our service providers, and on the right a handful, and it really is just a handful of the customers that are already being managed by our MSP partners and our MSP customers. You'll see more, hopefully, we'll see your names on there in the not too distant future. But at this point, what I want to do is hand over to Donovan, who's got a number of different scenarios and different use cases lined up so that we can show you how does Perspectium bring value to your business.
Donovan. Thank you, Andrew. So I know a lot of you joined the webinar to actually see the product rolling, and we're going to jump into the instance of ServiceNow and Perspectium here in a second. But I do want to set the tone of exactly what is Perspectium. Some of you may not be familiar exactly how we operate, so I'm not going to go too deep into the back end of Perspectium, but just want to give a high-level idea of what we are. So like Andrew stated before, we are integration as a service. So it's not providing you just with a simple toolkit and you're going to have to configure both ends and build both ends out. We work with you. We build out the integrations, to the other tools. Now, what I'm about to show today really is an MSP-specific solution that's utilizing our integration service as a backend. Now, part of the benefit of Perspectium 2 is our native application. So we have over 100 years of experience with our staff within ServiceNow, and it is a native app that lives in ServiceNow and gives you that control. It provides a cloud MBS or message broker system. You can see here on the slide. So as it exits ServiceNow, it is actually queued up and provides that ability to queue those messages, transform that data if necessary, and then have the other end of the integration be able to pick those up from those queues. So you don't have to worry about storms or the throughput capability, because we're actually using that high throughput queuing capability to be able to integrate with those tools, whether it's ServiceNow or something else on the other end. On the right hand side of the spectrum, you can see a lot of not only the tools that we do integrate with, but also we have pre-built integrations with some of the outsourcers out there. So BT, AT&T, etc. We can already communicate with them. We're familiar with their web services. So for your end customers that may be outsourced to them, or if you're providing service to a customer and you have to communicate with one of those other service providers, we already have pre-built integrations to those outsourcers. So to jump into the tool a little bit, I'm going to go through a scenario here where I have multiple instances. So as you can see in the upper left-hand corner, this is going to be our managed service provider, kind of the standard ServiceNow color schema. The blue will be a customer one, and that's Hooli for any of you Silicon Valley fans out there. And then the final one is the nice generic Acme, which everybody's familiar with. But just to set the tone a little bit, so looking from the native app perspective, you can see that it is installed directly into not only the service provider instance, but also you can install this on the end customer instance. We are in the ServiceNow store, So being able to download that makes it very quick and easy. But the idea is the control resides in the managed service provider to what data that wants to be sent out. Now, onboarding a customer can be as quick as obviously getting their ServiceNow instance set up and then installing the update set or downloading the update set from the store and then simply setting up the queues which it's going to be communicating with using our cloud broker system. Once that's there, you now have the ability to control the data going in and out. So just to show a simple replicator integration, from an incident perspective, if I want to go through, oops, I clicked the company there. If I want to set up a share and decide what data I want to share, it's not building out a REST message and writing a business rule on when it's going to fire off. It's simply checking boxes, create, update, delete. When is this going to be, what data is going to be included with it? Well, I can say I want to include the journal fields, I want to include attachments, I want to include embedded videos. What data do I want to send? Well, when assignment group is software, I'm going to send that out. So just like normal features and functionality in ServiceNow, we're providing the managed service providers the ease of use for integrating with your end customers. So you can set up your end customers as specific queues in ServiceNow and then decide what data is going to be sent to those individual customers. Therefore, you're utilizing their instance of ServiceNow, replicating that data up into your managed service provider instance without having to worry about things like domain separation and commingling of data, etc., because you're owning that on your managed service provider instance. To jump back to the slides, so working in the MSP, and I worked in the MSP group with ServiceNow for over 6 years, and the four real main factors that were affecting MSPs, time to value, visibility, centralized control, and scalability. So, this isn't, a revelation here. This is what a lot of businesses are actually dealing with. But the ability to spin up an instance of ServiceNow and deploy that update set really can provide you with that time to value. You can get a customer up and running, communicating, integrating quickly, plus you'll be able to push specific records to that instance. And I'll show you in a minute here how we can actually deploy an entire service catalog of managed service provider services directly to a sub-customer instance. Visibility, of course, you want to be able to integrate back and forth with that customer, pull all of their data in, and be able to aggregate that data, run reports on it, maybe utilize performance analytics, or also maybe offload that data into a data lake. And Perspectium has that integration capability where we can take that data from your incident, SLA, metrics table and put it directly into a database in the cloud, on-prem, and let your analytics be able to churn through that.
So I was about to give a reminder on remember to use the chat feature to ask questions. Someone got in there first. We have a question. Let me read it right. Do we have to activate performance analytics on all of the customer instances? You mentioned customer analytics, performance analytics as one of the components.
You technically would not have to do that, and that is a huge advantage too of being able to report, aggregate that data into one instance. Is if you wanted to utilize the power of performance analytics, simply turn it on or have it in your managed service provider instance and then have that integration data pulled into your instance, and now you can churn through all of your data. You can do trending analysis from all of your customer data, and you can use those breakdowns on a customer basis to be able to understand where your breaking points are, where your bottlenecks are, without having to pay for, or without having to have your customer pay for performance analytics on every single instance. So thanks for the question. The third point is centralized control, of course. You want to be able to understand and be able to control what's going on in that customer instance because you're providing that service to that customer, but you also want to have some sort of flexibility. And in my next slide, I'll actually cover one of the main pain points customers are having with ServiceNow. And then, of course, scalability. How can you do this at scale? If you're bringing on 10 customers in one day, can you do this in a repeatable manner so that you can deploy it, have consistency, but also speed and agility? So the current MSP configurations that I've seen with ServiceNow, there are two. There's the domain separation which is basically a multi-tenant instance of ServiceNow where you have multiple customers, but you're able to bring in all that data. It all lives in one instance. So the data, of course, is aggregated between and amongst customers. You have centralized process that can actually flow down. But one of the major pain points is the limited functionality of applications. Like I said, I've been to 7 knowledges in my time, and working there, one of the biggest questions I get from the managed service providers or even customers that are being managed is how do I maximize the capability of ServiceNow on a domain separated instance? And the truth is, it's difficult right now. ServiceNow is working on fixing it, but a lot of applications right now are just not domain aware, or there's a lot of configuration that goes into utilizing things like HR, customer service management, service portal, some of the new configurations that customers want, but the MSPs that are hosting domain separation cannot provide. Now, the other route would be to go to standalone instances. So now you have siloed data where MSP employees have to log in individually. You do have individual processes, which gives you a little bit more flexibility, but also difficult to control at scale. And then the benefit of this, though, and why a lot of customers are actually driving towards this, is the full functionality of the applications in the platform. So by doing this, you now can tell your end customer as an MSP, yes, we can turn on all these plugins. We can provide you with these applications without having to worry about the domain separation slowing that process down. So how does Perspectium handle this? Well, we're calling it the mothership solution. And once again, this is still in deployment. This is still a prototype, but this is what a lot of customers have been asked for. It's that hub and spoke subscriber notion where really what you do is you have your MSP instance, which is portrayed here as the mothership, and then you have 4 different customer instances going back and forth.
So I'm going to throw you off a little because another very timely question.
Sure.
The example you're showing here is ServiceNow to ServiceNow. What about other platforms such as Zendesk or Remedy or HPE, for example?
Yeah, great point. So we have that capability, and to go back to quickly go back to my previous slide. So we have HP Service Manager, Jira, Remedy plugins, which we can utilize, and we actually transform that data into our through our message broker service. So we have these already pre-built. So by utilizing the ServiceNow as your managed service provider instance on the left-hand side, you can absolutely e-bond with those other tools out there, synchronize. We work with you to decide, what fields, what values are going to be mapped, because every instance, of course, is unique. But then that data can all reside in a standard format in your ServiceNow instance, and you can report on it and have visibility at it at a high level, even though your end customers or even other outsourcers might be using multiple different tools out there. So thanks for the question. Keep them coming, and hopefully that answered it. If not, by all means, oops, bouncing around a little bit. Fire another question away. So the idea behind the mothership model is that you have a parent mothership instance that can do a variety of things. So first of all, you can have a centralized mothership process. So a lot of customers are confused on this. How do I have workflow that resides at the top instance? Well, the way we can do that is we actually will replicate the data from the customer instances and send those up to the mothership instance. When it lands in that mothership instance, based on the company, the instance it came from, or any other pieces of data, we can initiate custom workflow or standardized workflow across that incident or across that request item. And then when that request is updated in the mothership, that data can also be sent right back down to the customer, providing that visibility from a customer perspective, but allowing you to manage the entire workflow from that centralized mothership. We also are able to aggregate the data from multiple instances. So, like I was saying before, if you want to have 4 or 5 different customers and you don't want to have to log in and export that data individually, let Perspectium send that data up to the mothership. You put it all in one table, in the incident table, for instance, and you're able to visualize it, run reports, have your dashboards at a high level against all your customers, but you can then slice and dice it amongst your customers however you need to. It provides the full functionality of ServiceNow instances. So if you have some customers that are using customer service management, others that are just using for ITSM, you have that capability now to go to your customer and say, everything you saw at Knowledge, we can now do, and we're just going to replicate any of that data that we need to manage up to our mothership instance, but you can now run with whatever other applications you have. And the final point is you as an MSP can push standardized records down to child instances, whether this is part of your onboarding process or it's part of value add. As you continue to add services in your service catalog you want to provide to your end customer, you can push those down in a specific MSP catalog that will not collide with your end customer's current catalog. And then if they ever need to order services from you or make requests from you, they can do that and have visibility into an MSP-specific catalog. So what I'm going to do is jump back in the tool and actually show you how we can do that in real time, and just give you an idea of some of the potential of this new MSP solution we're providing. So I'm going to head over to what we call a bulk share. And what a bulk share is a combined share of records that you can schedule. And as I drill into this bulk share, you can actually see the components of this. So you can see that I'm sending over catalog items, choices, variables, etc. And what this is going to do is come from this MSP catalog that I already have produced. So I'm going to go ahead and execute this now, and it takes a few seconds to actually send over. But this will go over to my Hooli instance, where you can see that right now I only have a technical catalog and a service catalog. And I think I had a question come in from the chat.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting one because I know that you're going to bail on this because you're not a sales rep. The question is, what is the difference in cost between a domain-separated environment versus 4 unique instances? You want to take that one?
In my experience from ServiceNow, there was upwards of a 50% increase in user licenses, etc. Now, I've been out of ServiceNow for a little under a year, so that could change. But there is a cost difference, and there is an uptick on domain-separated instances. So it's something that you probably want to check with the ServiceNow to see exactly. But a lot of times they'll work with you and say, hey, look, I'm getting 4 instances, but I'm still getting the same number of licenses. A lot of times they'll work with you on that, especially if you have unique customers that are maybe turning on other applications like CSM or like HR. They're very flexible when it comes to buying a lot of products, let's say. So if I head back over to my bulk share, I'm going to go ahead and click execute now, and this is going to, I call this the total catalog, but this is going to send over a managed service provider catalog to my Hooli instance. So not only can you have a standardized catalog that you can send, but you could also create individual catalogs that are customer specific, or you could also have sub-catalogs that are tied to this. So that way, if you have offerings that customers, certain customers would want to receive and other customers wouldn't, you can pick and choose that and create those in your bulk shares and then schedule them or run them on demand. So that way you're ensuring that the customers will have the most updated catalog that you want to put out there. Now, as I head over to my Hooli instance and I click all to refresh, any minute now I should have an MSP catalog appearing. And what this will contain is, of course, the catalog, the category. It will contain the items and any of the variables and the variable types in there. And as you can see, I just refreshed and I have my new MSP catalog. So if I go to my service catalog page and I maybe want to add this up to my desktop or my catalog homepage, I now have my MSP catalog. I can drill in here. I can see my category, and then I can see all of the services that I'm providing now. So this is, the MSP saying, Mr. Customer, these are the services we provide. If you would like to contact us, by all means, go ahead and fill out one of these. So if I needed to get just a simple request for services and I say, you know what, there's something you're not providing, so this is more of a catch-all. I want to request this quote. I come in here and say, I need an IP phone. and I'm on gold service, maybe on platinum service, just like you would configure any type of catalog, I can order that now and create my request record, and this is actually going to be shared back into my managed service provider instance. So this request item, which lives in Hooli, can now go up to my managed service provider, and I'll go check my open requests, and any second here we'll then see that instance come back through. Let me see, what was it? It was 49. Sorry for hopping around too much. And I'll be able to not only walk this request, and there it is, request 39 or 1049, and there's my request for services request item, and as I drill down you can see all the variables came through. I need an IP phone. Now the ability here, or the workflow here, can be unique and specified on a per customer basis. You can see I've got a couple catalog tasks, but this is really where you can start to manage process at a high level. So to go back to our mothership idea, you can build multiple workflows or have business rules, execution plans in there for individual customers, and then as those records come in, they'll be identified by the specific item that came in, or you could also have the company name, or the company name is actually populated on every record. And from that perspective now, you can initiate individual workflow, individual process, and as it goes through that process, you can update it. So just as a quick update, I'm going to take this requested item and I'm just going to close complete and update that just to walk you through the process. So that requested item is closed complete, and as I head back over to Hooli, if I want to look at this request down below, if I request this is a state open, but within a few seconds here, this actually goes over to close complete.
Yeah, and just to give you a chance to take a breath.
Sure.
One of the things that this is a little off topic in terms of, it's not ServiceNow, but one of the things that we're finding is that the ability to pass all applicable and required information is a key factor. Particularly with, for example, with Jira, Atlassian Jira customers who are using Jira for their issue and project management, that they need to know what are all the work notes, what are the comments that have been associated with the incident that need to be passed over. Are there any attachments, screenshots, or particular documents that are attached? Passing of attachments in the Jira world is a big deal, and it's something that I don't think really anyone else has been able to tackle, certainly in the integration as a service offering. But so making sure that you've got all of the information that's required on both ends of that integration is proving a big positive for us.
Absolutely, yeah, and I mean, even from the control perspective, if you look at our share capability, if I want to include attachments, standard ServiceNow integration would take multiple web service calls, including journal fields, or the big one, just by checking this box, I can include reference field records. So that's not just taking the display value, I'm actually including the entire reference field record. So on an incident, I can include the entire caller record. I can include the entire CMDB record or configuration item record just with this checkbox. So it really gives you that flexibility to come in here and, just like everything else in ServiceNow, check a few boxes, build out where it's going to go to, and then have that integration built out. And then when you add the MSP functionality on top of it, as far as being able to manage multiple customers, having their instance names correlate to the actual customer ID, so when the records come in, it gives you more flexibility and becomes a true MSP solution. So we showed how you can actually push a catalog down. So you can have either single catalogs, multiple catalogs that are sent. Once that catalog's there, of course, we're going to be able to replicate that request data based on key pieces of information, and then the managed service provider can dictate what workflow it goes through and then update that record. So once again, providing that control, providing that process without having to manage in a domain separated instance or log into individual instances. Now, another key component is, of course, the visibility of data. So I can go from my just to my standard incident table, and I can run reports, and I can see I've got company Acme America, I've got Hooli's coming in, I also have some Acme UK. Those are the three main instances. One of the ideas here is that we have the dashboards that are broken down by customer. So if I log in, I can see I've got 15 critical incidents open, but I can see that they're grouped by customer. So my criticals are actually 7 of those are Huli, 8 of them are Acme Americas. Other data like metrics or time worked, I can see the average incident for Acme Americas is 5 hours. Acme UK is a little under that, and Huli, it takes about 5.5 hours. So similar reports that you could run in a domain-separated instance, but still providing that individual instance experience for all of your customers. And then, of course, if you do want to run performance analytics, you can have dashboards in there, and you can look at that broken down from a customer level. So just looking at one of the out-of-the-box dashboards, I can see a pivot table. And once again, because all of this data is integrated into one instance, I can see Acme Americas, Acme UK, Huli, what is the state of these? How many instances do I have? If I wanted to do trending or heat mapping, all I'd have to do is set up those indicators and create a breakdown on the company record, and then I would be able to see trending. I could, once again, analyze that data, or if we needed to get this data out and put it into a database, we have, once again, that simple plugin to be able to run that through our message broker system, and we can offload that to a data warehouse or a data lake.
So next question that came in, this one's a little more detailed. Where is the message broker hosted? For example, AWS, and is there a choice of region or location? I suspect it's coming from a security perspective or a data privacy requirements.
Absolutely. So, and we get that a lot on our standard call. So it is hosted, currently we're hosting in AWS and Google, and the Google is a recent addition to us, and we're going to also have Azure well, definitely by the end of the year, by the end of the quarter possibly. And yes, you can select your region, so the data can flow through there. The nice part is from a cloud broker service perspective, we also don't write any of the customer data to a database. So it is simply flowing through in a queuing system, and it can be queued up, but it's just there in memory, and then it's never written to a database. You don't have to worry about someone being able to hack in and query that data. It's simply a broker system that's passing it from either one tool to another. Great question, though. So really what we've touched on there is onboarding, time to value, being able to get your customers on by deploying that instance update set, and then also being able to push out catalog items, etc. So really speeding that time to value. We've discussed aggregating data, taking a look from a high level on reporting, whether you're using performance analytics or just standard ServiceNow reporting that gives you a snapshot in time, as well as being able to offload that data to a data lake or a data warehouse or an on-prem database. Now let's talk about really part of the day-to-day process of creating an incident or managing an incident. So this comes from 2 different perspectives. When I was first starting in the MSP world, a lot of outsourcers were actually trying to live in the SIAM world. And when I say that, I mean they were actually trying to provide integration management as a service, essentially being a service broker by brokering the communication between all of the other outsourcers. So for instance, you would come in and say, hey, I'm your SIAM provider. I will talk to your infrastructure. I'll talk to your app. I'll talk to your network providers for you. So in that instance, we have the capability to really speed up that MTTR, but it also could be from an end customer perspective. So if your customer is actually doing that SIAM layer themselves, they could communicate out to multiple outsourcers, and then you as an MSP would just be on the receiving end. And I think once I walk through this scenario, it'll make itself a little more clear. So generally, there's this ping pong game when an instance or an incident is created. So the customer will create an incident, and then something will be wrong. I'm not able to get to an application. So, the service desk may initially assign it to the network group, and then the network group will have it. Now that might be an outsourced network group. So let's say AT&T is actually managing the networks. So you have to then assign it to your network group, maybe have an integration that is sending a ticket out to AT&T, and then it goes into a black hole, and they sit on it for a while, and then eventually they get back and say, nope, Mr. Customer, it wasn't us. You may then go assign it to the application team or an application outsourcer, same thing. And it takes a while for that meantime to resolve to actually come to fruition because you're bouncing it back and forth. So a better idea is utilize our message broker service. So Perspectium here in the middle. Publish once and let these outsourcers subscribe to it. So you can create multiple instances on their tools while maintaining that single instance on yours. I'll show you exactly how we do this. And this is one example. So if I head over to my incidents and I want to take one of these incidents, for instance, and let's see here. And I'm gonna take this and I'm actually gonna set this state to broadcast. So this is just my definition of, okay, I'm gonna send this out to all of my outsourcers because something is wrong. So if I save this, what you'll see is down below at the bottom of this incident, I have 2 incident tasks that have been created. One of them heading out to the Hooley Corporation, one of them heading out to Acme Americas, both with the same short description. Essentially what I'm doing is creating, sub-incidents for them to manage. They can update and then I can update my own, but they're working on it simultaneously at the same time. So if I head back over to my Hooley instance and go to my open incidents, and within a few seconds here, we'll see a new incident that was created. And actually, what number was that? I'll sort by updated over here just so. Oh, here it is, rain leaking on the main DNS. So I can come in here into this incident. I can add some work notes and say, it's not us. I can close this out. And of course, the ITIL process of just throwing some garbage data into close notes. But as I update this from a managed service provider instance, if this was my network outsourcer, now they received an incident, they can close it out. I have my parent incident, which I'm able to manage, but then I have visibility down here for my incident tasks. So you don't have to use incident tasks. This is just me wanting to use as much out-of-the-box functionality as possible. But as I sit here and I refresh this, this was now set to closed. My closed notes can be updated in here. I can see that it was closed skip, and if I had my work notes updated, I'd be able to see that as well. So this has gone out to 2 different instances. If I head over to my Acme instance, same thing. I can go through the exact same process. I can look at my incidents here, my open incidents, and I should have that same DNS rain server on here. So if I go through and close this, now as a manager of this incident, I can create workflow. I can create notifications to say, hey, when both of these have closed out, maybe I'm automatically updating it. Maybe it sets it to a specific state to say, back with customer. That process is something that you as a managed service provider can build out, but we can provide that publish once, subscribe many notion, being able to broadcast, utilize our message broker system to talk to multiple instances, but then keeping those records in sync. So to the previous question where, hey, how do you communicate with service, or can you communicate with other tools like Service Manager or Jira? The simple answer would be yes. So if Acme Americas was using another tool, we would simply set up a separate queue that is pointing at their Jira instance. So anytime we created an incident task for Acme Americas, instead of having to go through and build out a custom integration, it would automatically know this one's going over to Service Manager, and we already have that mapping to come back. So as they update it, we're able to update this incident. So those are the 3 or 4 main use cases that we're actually starting with here at ServiceNow. So if I jump back to my slide deck, what to expect from us. So we have a ton of experience in the managed service provider world. We've actually hired multiple sales reps and developers and solution architects that lived and breathed in this world. So we're in the development process of building out this MSP solution. It's going to be out in the next 2 to 3 releases, and we generally do a release about once a month, so we'll see it before the end of the year. Some of the future developments we want to integrate with is, first of all, more of an administrative console. We have some tables to manage as an MSP to be able to put your customers in and understand their instance names, but really give you an administrative console to come in and be able to see how many records they're sending in, how many customers you have, et cetera, and make the management of it consolidated in one place. Service portfolio management, be able to see exactly how your services are performing and against CIs possibly, because we can replicate customer CMDBs. So if you have a business service that's down or a customer has a business service that's down, be able to track the availability of that and be able to track SLAs against it. And then, of course, cost management. If you're doing individual piecemeal priority one incidents, be able to track those dollars as they come in, see how much each customer is actually spending with you or should be spending with you, and find out if there's improvements in there, or also compare that against certain level of service that they have. One of the big things that I'm going to push for is also we have a secondary product called Observer. So if we include this into the MSP solution, what that allows you to do is observe the instance of ServiceNow. It'll be able to aggregate any health issues or best practices, if there's slow SQL queries, anything like that, and it can actually send that up to your MSP ServiceNow instance, and it will let you know and alert you to say, hey, you know what, maybe one of your customers created a business rule or is running a report that's bogging down their entire instance. You can now be proactive as the MSP. You can have an incident automatically open, and you can go down and say, hey, as part of your service, we see that you're seeing performance degradation. We want to fix that before it causes any other instance issues. And then, of course, we want to hear from you. A lot of this was built on my experience or our experience from the managed service providers saying, domain separation's not providing me what I need. I'm logging into 30 different instances to export reports. So any other scenarios that you guys may have, by all means, we'd love to hear it. We'd love to build it out in the product, because there isn't a solution out there right now that's specific for MSPs, and we want to be able to provide that to you, and also so you can provide a better service to your customer. So hopefully this gave you a little visibility into some of the potential utilizing Perspectium as that integration as service can provide. And as we continue to develop this offering, we'll definitely keep you in the loop, and there will be more webinars to come.